language and then printed language. So, Debbie, do you want me to wait 1 or 2 minutes? Sorry, I just like hopped right in there to start, but are we expecting?
I know that a couple others said they were coming, but I think we should just go.
Okay, all right. All right, so, and I think I've been overzealous with the amount of slides I built in, so we'll see what we can conclude, but stop me at any time and, you know, we always make this what you need it to be. So some take-home messages for today are really to understand the theoretical models for writing. So that's the first place. So what is the research telling us? What does it look like to scaffold writing in the different grade levels, and why do we need to do that? We're going to talk about the importance of direct, systematic, and effective teaching for all writers, and then really look at some instructional approaches. And hopefully I have enough time to end the day with a sample framework for how you might consider teaching students how to compose different types of sentences. Because I think for too long, we've been doing it in a kind of one and done model in terms of writing, and we need to spend more time and intensity on these kinds of things. So let's begin with the newest model that is out there from 2004 called the Not So Simple View of Writing. So I have two models here. I have one on the left side of the screen and one on the right side of the screen, and that is intentional. So recently, I actually got to speak personally with Virginia Berninger. She's one of the researchers within this model. She's pseudo retired at this point, maybe not so much. She loves to have conversations about this. The model on the left was developed in 2003. This is the simple view of writing. And then about a year later, they started to work on, based on some newer research, they modified this and renamed it the Not So Simple View of Writing. Now, the two areas in which they found where they really needed to concentrate some additional information that came out of the research is really this central triangle for working memory. They kind of updated this and they renamed it as cognitive flow, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then the other area that they kind of updated is executive functioning. So this is the Not So Simple View of Writing, and this is the most current model for how we should be really looking at what the research is telling us about instruction in writing. So what does this mean for us in practice? So when you think about getting a child to write, getting their ideas down on paper, obviously their working memory is activated right away. They have to pull out, and if we look back to the simple view of writing, they really have to think about what they're going to plan. So they're pulling from their long-term memory, right? And if we think about working memory, long-term memory, all of that is housed right here in the frontal lobe. Well, executive functionings are housed there too. Phonological working memory is housed there too. So there's a lot going on in the frontal lobe, which is really not fully developed until about the ages of 20 to 30. So, you know, there's a lot happening here in the front part of our brain. So kids are pulling out, you know, things from their long-term memory, thinking about what they know about what they're going to write about. In the process, and what's happening for me right now as I'm talking to you, I'm pulling from my short-term memory as I'm thinking about how I want to review and revise what I'm saying to you, right? So if I say something, I might go back and add a little bit more. Well, that's kind of what happens for us when we go to put our ideas on paper. But if we don't know a lot about the topic we're writing about, we don't know a lot about the vocabulary, the structure, all of that is going to kind of implode, or for lack of a better word, become like a volcano, right? Because they don't really know where to start, what to do, right? To organize that. Okay, so that's working memory at the center, at the core of everything. On the lower left-hand side is what we call transcription skills. These skills in research are typically referred to as lower level writing skills. It does not mean that they're easier or less important. It's just a term that they use in research. Transcription is really foundational writing skills. This is the ability to get your letters on paper with automaticity. So when I go to spell a word, do I have the knowledge of how to form those letters so I can get it onto paper? In addition, when we start teaching keyboarding, do we have enough touch typing capability in order to get our ideas on paper as well, right? So that's transcription. Those are the foundational skills. Over there also includes the use of white space, so meaning the margins on the paper, indentation, the size of your letters, the slant of your letter, the spacing between your words. So that's all foundational writing or transcription. Up at the top is what we call text generation. Sometimes people refer to this as composition. In research, it's referred to as higher level skills. Again, does it mean it's harder or more important? These skills include pulling out words, sentences, and organizing your thinking. So text structure is included in this. When you're thinking about writing narrative versus expository, what kinds of word choice are you going to use? Domain-specific words versus descriptive language, and how are your sentences going to be formulated on the paper? Both of these, text generation and transcription, cannot happen without the other. Okay, we can't have a skilled writer without having enough capability and learning in these two areas in order to do that. And really, if you think about it, transcription skills really have to be automatized, where text generation becomes more strategic over time, right? Because we learn about more complex structures, more complex sentences, those kinds of things. Okay, the one that really impacts us in the classroom when we're working with kids, and it impacts them as well, is executive functioning skills, right? So some of the things in the wording between the two models have shifted here. So they renamed some things to say supervisory attention, which means that the adult in the room who's leading the instruction needs to be keeping a pulse on what kids are doing. Why is that? Because young writers, if they forget how to write a particular letter or how to spell a word, they change their sentence, they start thinking about something else, they start writing about something else, and they lose that focus, right? So supervisory attention, that's us, keeping that attention for them, versus putting the onus on the kid in the prior model, which was conscious attention. So this is for the teacher to keep a pulse on things. Helping kids with goal setting, teaching them how to plan, review, revise strategies for self-monitoring and self-regulating. And this takes a lot of time for kids to be able to do independently. So in the beginning, for us educators, we provide kids with graphic organizers, sentence frames, constant reminders, checklists. All of those things can help to support this area of this model when we think about it. So to be a skilled writer, we need all of these things working in tandem with one another, and that takes a lot of time, right? So working memory, cognitive flow is absolutely happening all the time. And this idea of executive functioning, right? We have, can we control our impulses? And this is small on my screen. So can we take turns? Can we be patient? Can we follow directions? Can we focus? That's executive functioning, right? But we also, in terms of what can we teach in the classroom, well, in transcription, we teach handwriting. We should be teaching handwriting. We need to teach touch typing. We need to teach spelling, spatial organization, and punctuation. And then in terms of text generation, we need to make sure kids have some sort of topic knowledge about what they're writing about, that they are able to pull from a bank of words, that they know enough about text structure, sentence structure, text structure, genre, and format, and then the audience, in order to really be a proficient writer. That's really critical stuff. So these yellow and blue boxes are the things that we're teaching in the classrooms from K on up to 5 in elementary, to get kids to the point where when they're in middle school, a teacher can assign a task and kids can be somewhat independent with it. So any questions on that so far, or comments or thoughts? All right, so if any leader says handwriting's not important and doesn't provide time, you tell them they're wrong. All right, we might want to take that out of the recording. But no, and I'm not talking about handwriting today, but that's something that if we continue talking next year, that is something we can dig into, and keyboarding as well. All right, so the writing process is something that us educators learn about in school. We are very, very familiar with this. This isn't something new, but for many of us, we don't know where the research was behind this. And I found this fascinating when I first learned it. So 2 researchers back in 1981 studied the mental behaviors of experienced writers at work. those experienced writers were college students. So if you think about college students, and we go back to Berninger's model, college students have transcription skills, right? College students have text generation skills, right? So these two researchers are asking these college students to tell them, basically as they're writing, what is going on in their mind. Tell me what's happening. And this is the model that they developed. So you don't see anything about handwriting here or keyboarding here. You don't even really see anything about sentences here, right? What you do see is the fact that they're planning, that they're translating ideas, that they're reviewing and revising, and you do see these bi-directional arrows going back and forth, right? Working memory is involved here, but all of this is about executive functioning and cognitive flow, right? So when we think about what we do in schools, even in primary grades, this is what we do. We post a copy of the writing process, and we start teaching kids about pre-writing and drafting and graphic organizers and sentence frames and how to turn and talk and how to give feedback, and we review, revise, and we publish. And in some places, and I'm guilty of this, I used to say Monday is about planning, Tuesday's drafting, Wednesday is revising, Thursday's editing, Friday's publishing. And so my kids in 4th grade many, many years ago would say to me, I'm ready to write on Monday. And I'd say, no, today's not writing day, today's planning day. You have to wait till tomorrow, but I'm ready. I know what I want to say. So what was I doing to those poor kids? I was interrupting this flow, right? For those upper elementary school. But for our primary kids in school, what does this model do? It assumes they have the necessary transcription skills to be successful, right? So unless we're paying attention to both of these theoretical models to see and know exactly what our kids in terms of skills they have and don't have, we're already setting them up for failure in some cases. So when we think about two general sets of skills and the process that we go through to get kids to be strong writers, even from very early on, what does that look like in the classroom? And just like we think about with reading and the simple view of reading, we really need to be cognizant of the fact that we have to teach to automaticity foundational writing skills. And then we have to teach the strategic approach and the building of knowledge of composition through a process called the writing process. So let me pause and see if anybody has any comments or questions or thoughts. Oh, we have some things in the chat. I'm so sorry, I wasn't even looking. Oh, okay. Yes, got that. So any questions, thoughts, comments? Nothing. This usually stimulates somebody to say something in frustration.
Well, I tell you, this reminds me of back when I was in the classroom and I had a 3rd grade boy, incredibly bright, great reader, had lots of background knowledge, high vocabulary. But as soon as it came to writing, the tears would flow.
Yep.
And so this reminds me of something I was not paying attention to, is why did that elicit that type of response from a child who is so high achieving? So,
Yeah.
this is what this makes me think of.
Yeah, and I think that's important because a lot of us are like that. We're like, oh, they can read great. Come on, you can write. So, but when we look at these skills here, we can see where something might fall down for a child and then start to dig into those reasons. And I will tell you that the simple view of writing, you guys, and even the not so simple view of writing, if you noticed in the model on that first slide, there is no multiplication sign. It is not a model that looks identical to the simple view of reading. So anybody that tells you that, they are wrong. They have created a graphic to make it look pretty, to match it up, but that is not the model. There is no, it was not tested like oftentimes there's multiplication sign.
Oh,
Oh, I heard that, Christine.
I just didn't know that. I mean, I never was using it that way, but that's really a good, strong point.
That,
It's
because
important
there
that
are
you
people,
get that, because that multiplication sign, it can't be more clear in the reading model.
right,
So that's just interesting, but that just goes to show how much writing isn't reading, anyway.
no.
right?
Sorry, I'm glad for you. Yeah. No, and it's really important that we know that, because there are people out there that are creating models that look just like the simple view of reading, but Goff and Tumner absolutely tested their model with that multiplication sign as a mathematical theory to tell, show that both of these have a reciprocal relationship. This truly is the model. And when you read Berninger's work, it is saying that all of these things are working in tandem and building over time. But it was not tested with that other mathematical theory. Yeah. So as I mentioned, transcription must be automatized. And the reason why is kids cannot write, as Debbie just shared with us, they can't write those complex pieces of text, even if they're avid readers, if they don't have those skills. And we also know, based on research, that when transcription skills are not automatic, higher order composition processes are impacted. And it will limit the student's ability to hold language and ideas that they are writing. So there is a little bit of an activity, if you guys want to play along with me for a minute. I don't think I did this with you before, but if you guys just take out a little piece of paper and put your writing utensil in your non-dominant hand. I'm sure you've experienced this, but I'm going to do a little twist on it to show you about the transcription necessity. So unfortunately, either I was your kindergarten teacher and I forgot to teach you the letter S, or you had an IEP and the IEP said you only needed to know 80% of your letter names and letter sounds. So your special education teacher decided that S was not important. So when you're writing for the next minute, you are not allowed to write any words with the letter S. You can't leave it out either. So if you want to write Saturday, you can't just write Atterday. You got to find another word. Okay. You don't have it. Okay, so you're going to write for 1 minute with your non-dominant hand, and I want you to write about something you're going to do this weekend. Anything you want. I'm going to put 60 seconds on the clock, non-dominant hand, ready, go. Set timer for 60 seconds.
60 seconds, counting down.
Keep going. You're doing great. You have 8 seconds. All right, pencils up. So here's what I want you to think about. What was impacted for you? Was handwriting impacted for you? Okay. How about punctuation, capitalization? Did anybody leave any of that out? No, not too much. Okay. How about spelling? Yeah, maybe. How about spatial
Yeah, 'cause you
organization?
couldn't use S.
Oh, you couldn't use that, so you had to use different words. Oh,
I
so
had to come up with the word for surprise because I'm going to a surprise party.
okay.
So
So
I just
spell-
wrote, don't tell Jean, but I couldn't write, it's a surprise. You know what I'm saying? So I wrote, we will all yell, and I couldn't yell surprise so I had to write happy birth, and then we ran out of time, but anyway,
yes,
yes,
your
definitely.
spelling impacted your word choice, right? Spatial organization was probably impacted. How about sentences? Were they impacted? Did you write more simply? Yeah. And you couldn't really write about all of the things that you were probably wanted to pull out of your head and from your long-term memory to say on paper, because these things were impacted. So one could have been, the fact that I pulled away this fine motor piece that has been so automatic for you for so long. And it just impacts so many things. Even spelling for kids are going to impact word choice. And so if you were to look at a writing sample like this, and Debbie, I don't know if that student wrote something like this, but we could have really strong avid readers, or we could have really intelligent kids in their head, but they go to write for us and we make a judgment call that they're not intelligent, that they're not trying, that they're being lazy, right? We say these things, but sometimes it's the fact that something in transcription or something in composition is impacting the overall ability to show proficiency. Oh, you're muted, Debbie. Go ahead.
This reminds me, as I'm thinking about my two grandkids who have severe dyslexia, is how smart they are, but you would never know that by looking at their writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody
I was
else?
I was even thinking, just even as an adult, especially like if I'm doing a presentation in front of a large group, if I come to a word and I'm not sure how to spell it, I don't want, to misspell, I'll come up with another word, a simpler word that I know for sure. Even as an adult, there's some of those words that just don't stick to, and so I think we do that as adults too.
Yeah. And I like that you said that, because remember, I want you guys to remember, and a lot of teachers don't know this, educators know this, but reading always takes off on an upward trajectory and spelling will always lag after about the middle of second grade. So to your point, Dorothy, there are many more words that we can read with automaticity, but we cannot spell unless we double check it. Iridescence is a perfect word, right? I know you're laughing. You're like, don't ask me to spell that. I don't want to spell it either. And I'm going to make fun of myself for a second, but I always have to look up how to spell scissors from the time I was a child. I don't know if I learned it wrong or it's stuck, but I always have to double check it. My kids crack up laughing. They're like, Ma, that's the easiest word. That and license are two that kill me every time. But
mine is recommend and accommodation.
Yeah. And those are
two
common
words
in school, right? In education. Yeah. Other thoughts from anybody else that wants to share? All right, I won't force you. All right, so, but you kind of get the idea here. So how do we help children to feel comfortable and not do what I've seen in classrooms where they literally have a meltdown and start banging their head on the desk, right? That's like the worst thing. So a method that you can use with either what we can call striving writers, right? Those kids that are just, starting out or struggling a bit, or young writers, is called picture story, word story. This approach actually comes from Lucy Hart Paulson. She is the author of Early Childhood Letters. She's also a speech language pathologist by trade. She taught it to me and I've used it and seen it used very successfully in schools for a very long time. Sorry, that was a branch from my flowers. Okay. So, and I will get the YouTube link for Debbie to put in the Padlet for you guys. I did a very raw video during COVID, so it's not great, but I haven't redone it since. Okay. So I want to go back to Aries Phases of Word Reading just for you to be thinking about this approach. So if we think about using this model in the context of writing, for a pre-alphabetic phase, we might see a child making tick marks or just scribbles on the page, right? You know those kids who take a writing utensil and they write like their parents, but it doesn't look like much, right? So that might be at the pre-alphabetic phase. A child who's at the early alphabetic phase might be able to get some beginning sounds, right? So we're looking for kids to replicate within their picture story some beginning sounds. And kindergarten teachers, pre-K teachers might call this labeling beginning sounds, right? But we're going to do this in the form of sentence. Later alphabetic might be, and even early alphabetic or later, somewhere in between here might be beginning sounds, ending sounds, right? So we might see some of that happening. Beginning sounds, moving into beginning sound, ending sound. And then consolidated either might be accurate or it might be beginning sound, a vowel sound, and an ending sound, right? So if you think about this approach in terms of like points of entry, if that makes sense, that's what we're looking for, okay? So I'm going to show you what the approach looks like. And I'm going to credit Tina Sande. She's a kindergarten teacher in Prince George's County. 2 years ago in the spring, I showed her the model. She started it in March, and this progression of her students' writing are for 6 weeks of instruction. So you'll see what they were able to do with this. And Lucy would always say, what I think I can say, what I say I can write. And if we think back to that cognitive flow and executive functioning, that's what we want, right? We want to hold our thinking. We want to be able to verbalize it, right? Speech, then what we're saying to print, right? And so where are these access points? Okay, so this is the way the approach goes. You stand up in front of the class with a blank sheet of paper. You draw a little image and you say a sentence, right? So the sentence is, I can play with my dog. And you say to the kids, everything's blank, nothing's written on. I'm a teacher. I've been writing for a really long time. And this is what my writing looks like. And you write everything out. You say a capital I, space, can, play with my dog, period. And you verbalize some good things, about spacing and letters, whatever it is. And then you accordion fold that away so they can't see teacher writing, okay? And then on the next line, you say, some of you know a lot about letter names and letter sounds, and your writing might look like this. Now, while you're doing this next line, you're gonna elicit from the kids how to spell the sounds. So it's, I can play with my dog, so you elicit, so as when you get to a word like play, you'll go, what letter spells ooh, what letter spells, a, what letter spells what letter spells I, right? So you get there. So that's beginning, middle, end, or beginning, vowel, end. Fold it up again, accordion fold. Some of you are working on beginning sounds and ending sounds. And this ties back really to, when we think about Aries phases, to phonological and phonemic awareness, right? Beginning and ending sounds, getting to that segmenting of 2, 3, 4 sounds in a word. And then mapping it with the letters. So you do beginning and ending sounds, and you fold that away. Some of you are just starting to understand that words have a beginning sound. So your writing might look like this. So as you're doing this, I'm going to leave a space, can. What's the first sound in can? What letter? They might say C, they might say K. You're going to put down what a majority of the kids say. So, and you're going to make sure that they have the number of words. Now, if you have kids that are at that pre-alphabetic phase, you might do random squiggles or random circles or, vertical lines, whatever it might be. You're going to model one level above where your highest student is. So that's your starting point. And then you model to the point where your lowest student is, not below where that is, because we don't want them to do less. We want them to reach for more. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to show you what this looks like. So Tina did this, and what she wound up doing is and I had never done it before this way, but again, educators, we're really smart. We make changes, we make things better. She took away the sample writing, and this is just another example for you, but she took away the sample writing, and then she would say things like, the sentence is, I play with my dog, 5 words. So we're going to draw a line. I'm going to draw a line. I play with my dog. So there's a word on each line, and then they're going to draw. This is a different image, but just so you get the idea, her writing is under here. She would fold it up so they couldn't see it, because she wants to see their beginning access point. Where are they going to start? What are they going to do now that I've modeled this? So the kids go to their table, and this is the example from I can play with my dog. So this student we're going to come back to on the left, and you can see we've got some handwriting issues here. She's using great paper. He's got a backward C. Why do you think the child put the letter Y here for with?
Because of the sound that the letter name begins with.
Yes, why with, absolutely. Yep, so why. And then my, we've got to work on making the letter M. And then dog, backwards B, right? This kid really far along, looks just like teacher writing, right? This child, she was walking around the room, and this is really easy to give feedback to kindergartners who are writing, short like this. He put the beginning sound for each word in the sentence, and she said, I think you can do more than that. Can you try to stretch those sounds out and show me, how to spell those words? When she came back around the second time, that's what he was able to do. So just that little prompting again. Remember from the model, we need to sometimes help them with the executive functioning piece. Here in this, the child writes, I can play with my dog. Why might they do that? We see this a lot, right? With, W-I-F, instead of with, why? Why are they doing that?
It's a phonemic error.
Yep, it could be a phonemic error, right, in articulation, or it could have something to do with dialect. It may be that's how they say it in their home dialect. And we have lots of dialects around the country in which people will replace orally with the sound, but it is close in articulation, and it's something that we need to pay attention to. So remember I told you we were going to come back to that little kid right here, right? This is one of her low babies in the class, March of kindergarten. A week later, the next one he was going to write is, I like to eat cake. So I just want to show you this. Upper and lowercase I, L-I, the K is really smushed and pointing downward. 2 is correct. Eat, the E is facing straight down. K-A-K. Huge difference. And if you think back to Aries phases, right, you can definitely see that shift between at least 2 phases kind of playing and manipulating in between early and later alphabetic in terms of that. So that was a week later. So she didn't model this every day. The first week, she might have modeled it 3 times and then gave them a couple minutes to write. Then after that, she might have done 2 times. And then she would model when she did a new type of writing. So I'll show you where she brought this into the other types of writing. So 6 weeks later, she knew that her system wanted kids to do response to text. Tough stuff. It's scary. So they had to read decodables, which is great. They were reading Meg Likes Bugs. And so what she decided to do is take a picture from the book and have them do a response based on the picture. So here is Meg with her bugs and bugs on her hat, and they could write about the image. Meg has a big hat. It has a bug on it. Here's a couple of more. Meg has a big hat. 2 bugs jump on it. There is a bug on her. Multisyllabic word. Great phonetic approach, right? So that's another way that you could kind of weave this into KN1. And even for EL students or older struggling students, there's nothing wrong with giving them an image about content and seeing what kind of response they can come if you're modeling, an access point for them. She also applied this approach to using it with opinion writing. So Duck Rabbit, really famous book. I don't know if you know it or not. If you don't, you should get it. It's an amazing text by Amy Krauss Rosenthal. So this image occurs throughout the entire book in different settings. And you have to decide whether this is a duck and you see his bills over here, quack, quack, or whether it's a rabbit and these are his ears and he's sniffing. So you have to decide what it is. So they had their opinion, and then she gave them pink or yellow paper, right, to decide if it's a duck or a rabbit. And so we can see here, and again, this is 6 weeks later, 6 to 8 weeks later. It has a long beak, it can quack, it can lay eggs because it can hop. It has lonk versus long, right? We know that confusion, that rear nasal to the rear stop sound. Long ears, it can run away, it can quack. And so what she had said, and she's been a teacher for almost 30 years, I think she was at that point. She said to me, she has never, ever had everybody engaged in writing. She said that was the first year ever in her career where she didn't have one kid shut down on her by using this approach. So it's pretty powerful. So let me just pause there and ask if you have any questions or comments or thoughts about this approach for either striving writers, young writers, new writers, whatever your thoughts are. Or you can say, I have nothing. Move on. Is that helpful? Do you think teachers would be open to it?
I do, because I feel like writing comes up all the time in the professional development that I am doing, is that is the thing that a lot of educators do not feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so I see that an awful lot. I do have a question, is when you were talking about that beginning process, is that whole class and you're showing all of those different layers to everyone?
Yes, thank you for that clarification question. Yes, you are showing those layers. And again, you are going to know where your highest student is. So if you have a student who is beginning, middle, ending sound, you can model teacher writing. But if you have children that are just doing beginning, middle sound, you're going to model this level. And then as you continue to model, you're going to keep modeling one level above until you can get to model that teacher writing. Because that's what we're striving for. But we know that in kindergarten, we're not expecting that. Yeah. Becky, I'm sorry, Christine and Becky was going to comment. Not that, then I'm calling on you, Becky.
Okay. No, I was just gonna say that I think especially my kindergarten teachers could really get behind this, and this would be something that I could come in and model for them, but it's exciting to see the progress in the pictures. Does she have a book on this method or like a resource that I could refer to?
Lucy?
Yeah.
So the only place I know that where it's written, it could be in the Bell's book, but it's really expensive. That's Lucy Hart Paulson's. Let me write this down because I need to put these resources in the chat box. So
Okay.
it's the Bell's book. It's her resources, but I want to say I bought it myself. It was like $200.
Okay.
But it's early childhood activities. The other place I've seen it is in EC Letters, and I don't know if your district has access to any of those manuals, but it is in there.
Okay.
And then the other thing is the video that I did on YouTube of the method and the approach, but I'll put those three things in the Padlet.
Okay.
But to my knowledge, and I could ask her, I don't think Lucy has done a video or anything on it, just because I think it's in EC Letters.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, so.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm taking notes, but I'm worried that like come fall, I'm gonna need a refresher.
Yeah, and the YouTube video I did goes through the whole method, and I model it in my office, not with kids, but
Okay.
I still model the approach. Yeah,
Perfect. Thank you.
no problem. All right.
Yeah,
so-
I was gonna say, I think my experience, because I just got this job this year, but I feel like there's been such an emphasis on reading, and good thing, but I feel like writing's, it's just not the priority, and it's sort of getting maybe perhaps ignored. So
Yes.
I think teachers would be very open to getting some approach with this or what have you for regarding teaching writing, because we just haven't had all year long. I just didn't see much emphasis on it anywhere you go, you know?
Yeah. So true. And it's a scary thing to teach, I would add.
Mhm.
Dorothy.
I was just gonna ask, so like in a week, so like a week would, like at the beginning of the week, you're starting a type of writing like this one, I can play with my dog, just sentences. I mean, do you start at the beginning of the week and do the model like you said, and then maybe that same day, you know, you turn it over to the kids, but how often do you do this? And, you know, because you want the kids writing every day.
Yeah. So I think what Tina did, she said, because, you know, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Is somebody talking?
No.
Okay. I think if I remember what Tina did, she said she did it about 3 days a week because she didn't have time every day to do this in, the schedule. Things have changed since then a little bit. But then after that, and she kept working with narrative for quite some time. And then what she actually did, and I feel bad I didn't put this image. Hold on, I'm gonna see if I can pull it up here. I'm just pausing my screen for a minute. She carried it over eventually into narrative writing that looks like this. Let me just see if I could find it here. One second. Nope. Okay. So this is that kid who wrote can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
This is that kid who wrote just one letter at a time, and then went to I like cake. So you can see here, she started to do other things. Either they could draw a picture, she used an image as a prompt, she had a checklist, and there are several sentences. So you can, adapt this as kids kind of progress and then give kids option as to whether they're staying with single sentences or whether they're ready to write multiple sentences and then weave it in. And I would say, kindergarten teachers are pretty astute to kind of know what their kids, how much they're ready for and how not, most of the time. I would say sometimes other teachers hold back a little bit, but kindergarten usually is pretty good about kind of figuring that out. So I would say, test the waters and see what's working, and how much practice they need to, and every audience is going to be different. So some audiences might need more modeling and others might get it right away. You know that. Classes are different every single year. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have an exact science on that yet.
No, just kind of curious of what it looked like in a week. Yeah. But
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So, there are, other kinds of activities that we can do to support young writers, right? Dictation is another one. Copying letters and working on strokes in centers. Once we know that kids are formulating their letters top down, left, right, or right, left for lefties. Writing the alphabet is a good use of time for kids that maybe, are just starting out. Drawing and oral rehearsal of storytelling with a partner is good to get kids to A, generate questions on their own, and B, respond to those questions in complete sentences. That helps with this approach. Connecting the dots. So learning, kids will, for fine motor, to help with strokes and keeping on lines, right? So connecting the dots with numbers and mazes and tracing. Message writing by the teacher and making some corrections on the message writing is always helpful. And then playing with letters. So sorting them, doing puzzles, finding them in text, cutting them out, and then sorting them. Those are all really good kind of centers or writing practice activities for kids that may be struggling with sentence formation or may need some additional support with that letter processing. And I'm sure you guys probably have others as well. But I'm always asked that question. Because again, we go into classrooms and what kind of centers do we see in kindergarten and first grade? Reading centers, right? We have to be doing. And I would add that most primary grade level teachers should have a daily fine motor or 2 center every single day for kids. So a Play-Doh center, a Lego center. I recently saw on Pinterest, Pinterest has some great center ideas for kindergartners. A big screw with a lug nut where kids have to turn the lug nut on and off. And there are different letters on the lug nut so they can use the different screws to build different words. So they might have an alphabet lug nut and then a consonant lug nut, and they could create words like at and it that way by turning the screw. Just make sure they know not to swallow it. That's why I said a big one. Yeah. Well, I know there's always danger in some of this. Oh, thank you, Christy. You have the Bells book? The $200 book?
Yes, I do. It's a great book and we're looking at purchasing it for all of our kindergarten teachers, but our curriculum director was having a little bit of trouble finding enough copies of it at this time. So I don't know.
You know what? Let me put Debbie in touch with Lucy. Let me ask Lucy if I can, Debbie, make a note and I'll email Lucy after to see if she knows where we can get copies of the book, because otherwise you're going to wind up paying outrageous prices.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. But you can photocopy up to 10% of a book without violating copyright rules and laws. So if you want to photocopy that one page or scan it so you can add it into the Padlet, that might be really great for everybody in this group. If you don't mind, Christine.
I don't mind. I can take care of that. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay. And then writing their names, tracing their names using dots, and then writing without scaffolds. So that's the last one. Okay. So I'm going to go into sentence level writing now. So any questions about any of that? Everybody good? Okay. So there is a true difference between parts of speech and parts of sentences. And William Van Cleve, who was my mentor and friend, he always said that we need to focus on the function of words in the sentences versus what they're called, right? So if I say to you the word pet, what are you thinking of? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Just shout it out.
The subject,
Subject. And who else is thinking something when I say pet?
I was thinking of petting a dog.
Okay, so you were thinking of a verb, which could be the predicate, right? So depending on the function, that word, depending on where it is in the sentence, the function of the word is going to shift, right? And that's something that we need to be cognizant of. Now, grammar and grammar terms or parts of speech terms give us a language to have a conversation with kids about grammar, right? But in the beginning, we really need to focus on function over form, okay? So I just want you to be thinking of that. This absolutely comes from William's work. So I credit him at the bottom. I just recreated it. William did a lot of things with color coding. I know that, what is it called? Language Circles has a book. Oh my gosh, I want to say Writing Matters, but that's William's book. I'm trying to think of the intervention program from Language Circles. Framing Your Thoughts. It's a special education writing program. They do a lot of things with images and triangles and squares to get kids. So things that'll help kids to recognize parts of speech over the terms. So we know that nouns and pronouns, right, work as the subject, sometimes not always of the sentence, right? Because we can have additional nouns in the sentence that are not the subject. Verbs and adverbs are in green because they work conjunctively together. Adjectives are in a lighter blue because they work with nouns to do some describing. And then conjunctions are red. These are words that join other words or groups of words or even sentences, and prepositions, right? To show a prepositional phrase. William used to say, think about a preposition, not always, but most of the time, anything you could do to a box. You can go around a box, you can go in a box, you can go under a box, you can go over a box. So it's just one way to get kids to kind of gravitate and understand prepositions. A good thing for young kids is to act them out, especially in kindergarten. Stand in front of your chair, stand behind your chair, sit under your desk, that kind of thing. Okay. The other part of language instruction is understanding parts of sentences. So we need kids, and this is going to shift over time. Oh, that's another thing I want to put in the Padlet pattern sequence. Okay, sorry, making myself a note. Subject, predicate. William used to call it the doer and the do, which I really like. It really helps me and helps kids. So the subject is the doer. The predicate is the do in this sentence, right? So what is the doer doing? And then eventually you can weave these more complex or abstract terms in there. We have to, by third grade, start teaching kids about clauses and phrases. And we need kids in third grade to know about a dependent and an independent clause, because if they don't, they cannot formulate and understand how to formulate complex sentences. So that's a critical piece. But again, you need to look at your standards for that. So every sentence includes a subject and a predicate. We need kids, especially for, and everything that I'm telling you here that we're going to talk about in sentence level instruction, really before we have kids generating sentences, should be done in reading comprehension first. Before we give kids, and this is what I'm talking about when we talk about one and done, like I used to give the kids every day a sheet and say, underline the subject, circle the predicate, or circle the subject, underline the predicate, right? And they would do it, but the knowledge never went beyond that. And I never tied it back to reading comprehension. If kids can't identify or find the doer and the main do in the sentence, they're going to have a really hard time with reading comprehension. And what happens with older kids in text is that these two main subject, right, the subject and the predicate and the do, wind up getting a whole bunch of other stuff in between it. And so the doer and the do wind up getting further and further and further apart in the sentence. This I can guarantee, and I haven't done a study on it, but I wish I could, I think happens with math word problems. Start taking a look at math word problems. 9 times out of 10, it's the words, the extra words that get in the way of the student understanding what they need to do, because they can't find the doer and the do. This all relates back to comprehension. So everything that we're going to do here, we want to be able to bring up during our read alouds. So when we have a sentence like the spunky dog ate the toy, I need them to be able to find the simple subject, dog, and then ate, right? Because in a math word problem, we do this too. You know, we start adding all these descriptive words on the big yellow bus. Well, we don't care about the big yellow bus in math, right? We want to find the numbers and what are the numbers telling us to do? The complete subject is the simple subject and all its baggage, and the complete predicate is the simple verb and all its baggage as well. It's a simple predicate. So we need to make sure that they're able to pull just these components out of the sentence. There is a real progression of sentence level development. So early on, even before kids get into school and then continuing in elementary school, we need to make sure that not only teachers are asking and answering questions, but kids are able to generate a question and then being able to respond in a complete sentence, right? So start having teachers have kids generate a question to another student about a text that's being read aloud. Because as they practice this in oral language, this will transpose into written language. Moving into the simple sentence, which is a sentence that contains at least one subject and one predicate, and it's a complete thought. And usually by first grade, we teach the 4 types of simple sentences, right? We teach statement, question, command, and the 4th one's escaping me. I'm having brain freeze right now. But you all know, I have a slide on it. We'll get to it in a second. And just know that simple sentences aren't always simple. They could have lots and lots of words in it, lots and lots of descriptions in it. By first grade, we need to start teaching kids how to use what's called a coordinating conjunction. They don't need to know it's called a coordinating conjunction. They could just know it's a conjunction. There are 7 coordinating conjunctions in English. There are, we use the acronym FANBOYS to recall them. And in the beginning, we want our first graders to be able to join subjects. So Dorothy and Christine, Dorothy or Christine, Becky, but not Christy, right? We want them to be able to do that. Same thing with predicates, walk and run, walk or run, walk but not run. So in first grade, we're going to teach the easier of the 7 conjunctions. And by second grade, we're going to make sure that they know all 7 of them. But we're not only going to teach it in the format of writing, we also need to address it in reading comprehension. What does this do to the sentence when these conjunctions show up? And by the end of first grade, they have to know how to join 2 simple sentences to create what we call a compound sentence. So there's an example down here. So they'll need to know how to create a comma. That goes back to handwriting. And they need to know that they need to have a subject and a predicate in the first part and a subject and a predicate in the next part, or a doer and a do. And it's a complete thought. By third grade, as I mentioned, kids need to know the difference between a clause and a phrase, a dependent clause and an independent clause. And now they're going to learn about something called a subordinating conjunction. And sometimes in complex sentences, there's a comma needed, and other times there's not. So the first example begins with a subordinating conjunction. So all I did to this simple sentence here, Sage went to the beach, is add a subordinating conjunction to it. That becomes this dependent clause. When Sage went to the beach, when Sage went to the beach, what? She swam in the water, and I have a comma there. Or I could take, she swam in the water when she went to the beach, and there's no comma in that structure for a complex sentence. Complex sentences should be worked on in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So 3 years working on this skill to get them to really automatize it. And again, we want to pull this stuff out of reading comprehension and read alouds and text that we're reading in class, not only in English, but in other content areas, because this is going to set the reader up to expect some more information, right? It's about structure. So here we go. Oh, imperative, that's what I forgot. Oh no, exclamatory, that's the one I forgot. So command is an imperative. So the simple sentences, we have 4 types, as I mentioned. One of the hardest ones for kids to generate on their own is the imperative. So we can teach kids to say a sentence with the word you in front, which is the subject, the doer. You wash your clothes. Wash your clothes is the imperative, right? That's the command. You stay away from the stove. Stay away from the stove is the imperative. So all I have to do is tell them to formulate it orally with the you, the subject you in front, and then drop it, and they can formulate the imperative. A great thing to do once kids learn to write the 4 types of simple sentences is to have them do this in content areas. So give them a vocabulary word that you're learning in social studies, science, mathematics, and have them write 4 types of sentences so they can apply this to the content that they're learning. And as much as we can apply language instruction to content, then we're kind of dipping in across our day to connect a lot more for kids. Because we want to see this transfer to knowledge and for them to see why it's important. The 4th sentence is exclamatory. Where is that? Oh, thank you. You're telling me from before. Yep, I missed it. Thanks, Christy. Keep me on my toes. Other questions or comments? Sorry, so far. So in looking at this progression, I just want to ask you, what is happening in your district, in your schools? What are you guys seeing? Just to kind of share as a group, what are you noticing that's happening or not happening?
In the district that I'm in, I feel like the explicitness of teaching the sentence types, as well as how to combine sentences, knowing the difference between a simple sentence and a compound sentence and a complex sentence. Those are some of the, I think, foundational skills that are being left out. And then I think that's part of the reason why our kids are not writing as much as they should, or even with, I think teachers knowing that that should be included in their instruction isn't always the case.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point, Christy. And would you say, let me ask a question, would you say a lot of teachers are uncomfortable with this type of instruction?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
I
they will,
would-
they will tell you so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I can remember William the first time he came to our district and he was working with us several years ago. And I remember him calling me out in front, because we knew each other, in front of, you know, the 50 people that were there. And I was mortified, like I froze, you know, and it was just something simple. He probably just asked me what the doer and the do was in the sentence. And I was like, you know, I just was second guessing everything. I was stunned. And even today, sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish, you know, William was here, because I would text him at 10 o'clock at night and say, okay, help me with this sentence. Help me understand this, you know? And I can't do that. So it's tough. It's tough. So I would agree with you. Other thoughts? Christine, did you want to say something?
I just feel like there's like a lack of understanding as to what you even mean when you say writing instruction. I think there's a lack of focus on writing, you know, as like one of the things that should be predominant in a 6-hour day. And I think there's just the complexity of it and all is concerning insofar as I don't know how a teacher knows where to situate herself for a direction. How do I direct myself towards it? It's if you go on, say, edreports.org or
Mhm.
any of those others, we're supposed to give you, you know, what programs are out there are really good. There's just not a lot of writing programs to begin with. And then, like, for an example, I like Writing Revolution. I like the Writing Rope. I mean, there's been some books out there, but I don't see, and help me with this, because maybe I'm just missing it. I'm not saying this is how it is. I'm saying this is what I think it is. I don't see like a scope and sequence on it.
Yeah.
What should kinder be able to do? What should first? I mean, they're so lock and step on these reading programs, man. If you don't have that, you're not green on Ed Reports or whatever. But why for writing is it different?
Yes.
Or is it different? I don't know.
Yeah, it is a bit. And I'm going to put this in. I'm just pulling this up right now. So I'll put this in. I'm going to put the link in the chat and have Debbie add this to the Padlet for you guys. So first we need to lean to our standards, our language standards. But I will tell you, even in the Common Core standards, there are things that are missing, things that have been left out. And so before William passed away, he had been working on with Patton, which is a Pennsylvania, kind of like the Ohio, you know, board group that you all get support from. They have a group. And I don't know if you've seen this, but he had worked on putting this together. So these are all, they call them micro and macro skills. So kind of like lower level, higher level skills. And he put it all together up until 12th grade to when you begin the instruction, develop the instruction, and secure the knowledge. So that's in the chat box. And so that had been developed prior to that. So that might be a little bit of help, but you need to look to your standards as well to make sure. Yeah, it is a great resource. Yeah, for sure. So that's we can add that to the tablet, to the Padlet.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for that.
Of course. All right, so let's take a look. Again, this will be in the handouts for you. This was, again, something that I learned along the way, something that I didn't think about. But when we think about comprehension, what does this conjunction for mean? Like, what is it leading me as a reader to try and understand, or then as a writer for my reader to understand? Well, it's going to connect a solution with a problem, right? So as we're teaching these very slowly, we'll start teaching and, but, and, or in first grade. We want to do it in the context of reading comprehension and then apply it to writing, and then do the next 4 in second grade. So we have 2 years to kind of work through this and then to continue that knowledge all the way up. But to do that, teachers need resources that are going to provide them with an understanding. So this will be in the handouts as well. Now, obviously, yet is not something we see very often. It's a more difficult conjunction to use, but it connects two ideas that go against each other. That's very similar to but, right? So it's a more, I guess, advanced conjunction for but, right? So making sure that our educators are aware that these very simple words, these very small words are extremely powerful in the context of text. And we want to give teachers a way to start getting kids to understand that these conjunctions, their purpose is to connect things, put things together. And it was funny the other day, well, I'll come back to it in a second. Let me write it down because I'll forget. All right. So conjunctions, right? I can give two images and I could say to the kids, generate a question. So the question could be, do you like chocolate and strawberry ice cream? Do you like one ice cream or two ice cream cones? Right? Or whatever, that wasn't or, but that's and. Then answer in a sentence. We could do it with but. I like strawberry, but not chocolate. You could also use, an image like this, and they could say, do you like strawberry, caramel, or chocolate syrup? So you could get lots of oral sentences and questions out of images. So something as simple as this, just to get kids to understand taking that question and statement generation to apply it to using and starting to play around with these conjunction words. Images like this. So where is the cat? The cat is under the rug. Is the cat in the box or under the box? The cat is in the box. And it was funny, I did this a couple of months ago at a big conference. I had like 500 people in the room. And I asked the question, is the cat in the box or under the box? And everybody responded in the box. And I said, I told you, complete sentence. They all chuckled. We talk in phrases, right? But we want to make sure that if we want our kids to respond in sentences, we have to model that. So that was a big, aha for the audience at the time. We can also do things like this with prepositions, right? So remember the red and the orange box in the very beginning, prepositions and conjunctions, right? So generate a statement. The cat is under the rug. The rug is on top of the cat. The hen is on top, sitting on the eggs. The eggs are under the hen. So lots of ways to kind of generate this. Just need images that are going to produce those kinds of things that you're looking for. Okay. Another thing that really is supported by research is sentence expansion. So there's a couple of things in terms of sentence development or sentence instruction that are supported by research. So sentence expansion is one, sentence combining is another, and sentence generation is the third. So expansion, combining, and generation. Those are the three top ones that are supported by research. So how do we get kids there? Because I'll tell you, you could ask a third grader to add an adverbial phrase, and they're going to look at you like a deer in headlights, right? So wouldn't it be easier if we used question words to get kids to expand sentences and then later start adding in that, oh, that's an adverb. Oh, that's an adjective. Do you see that, right? So then we're going to layer on those abstract terms once they are able to do this, right? So, and we are using these question words in reading comprehension. So kids need to know that when I ask when, it's not just a time of day. It could be a year, a month, a specific date, a season, right? It could be a lot of things. A where, right? Why and how. So we're going to start with a very, very basic, simple sentence with one doer and one do. Complete thought, dogs bark. This is a kernel sentence or a bare bones sentence, whatever kind of terminology you want to use. And we could even give kids an image so that if they can't think of where, right? I have the bee sits, they don't have background knowledge. So I give them an image and I say, where does the bee sit? And they tell me on the flower, right? Because they have that image. So that can help them. And so very slowly, I can add in these question words to get kids to learn to expand these sentences. And what this does is it really gives them a wardrobe of language. Because the way we speak to our friends at the coffee shop or at the bar is different than the way we speak to a colleague, a principal, a superintendent, a parent, a medical doctor. And so we need lots of ways to speak to people, right? To build their language. So I might say, where is the bee sitting? The bee sits on the flower. When? The bee sits on the flower during the day. And kids have just generated 2 prepositional phrases without me having to label it. Why? To drink its nectar. How? Gently, quietly, right? So again, I don't always need those labels in the beginning. But we need to do this work in the context of reading comprehension before we ask them to do it in writing. So one of the really, really fun things that I've done with kids is I put the groups of words on index cards. So I would have dogs barked on 2 index cards. Then I might have a where statement on another different color set of index cards. So in the park. And I tell 3 kids, you're a unit. You have to stay together. Okay. And then I might have why, a why statement or a when statement. And what I ask kids to do is they take their index cards and they become a human sentence. Does that make sense? And they all stand up together and then they create their sentence. The other thing that I do on the index cards is so that they don't know what starts the sentence. One side of the card has a lowercase word and the other side has it in uppercase. So that if I want in the park to come first, they have the option to put that at the beginning of the sentence and then have dogs barked at the end, or dogs barked in the park and dogs can begin it. Or I can really push them to separate the doer and the do and say dogs in the park barked, right? So that they can see there are many ways to formulate these kinds of sentences. Questions on that? Or thoughts or comments? I should have put a picture in here of that. I'm sorry. I didn't think of that until now.
I have modeled this in the classroom for teachers and then had them do it afterwards with their own children, and they loved it. The kids love it. It gets them up out of their seat. They want to be part of the activity. You can do it with, expanding a sentence, combining sentences. It's just, there's, you can meet the kids where they are and go from there. So it really is a great activity.
Thank you. And they like it and they get out of their seats. You can also have kids do this in the context of taking a mentor sentence from a text that they're reading and tell them, hey, make the author's sentence better. How are you going to do that? And then they can come up with their phrases that they want to fancy it up. And that's a really great thing to do as well. I just want to see if I could pull this image up real quick to show you. Oh, I don't think it went through yet. Hold on, it's coming.
I have one more thing to add.
Yeah.
On the flip side, doing this for comprehension, taking a sentence out of a book and looking at the parts, that's very helpful to kids too.
Yes, it is. And we need to do that before we do it in writing. So this was a school I was working at in Alabama. This group was one sentence. This group was one sentence. And then this teacher became the comma and the and to create a compound sentence. So not only did we talk about doer and do, and we added when and where statements, but then we were able to put it all together to create one long sentence. And they really had a really good time with it as they were doing this kind of work. So, and you could see the 3 girls here trying to figure out who's going to go first, second, and third. So that was a lot of fun for them and for me. Oh, this is what I'm going to tell you. So I'm in a 3rd grade classroom in Alabama, and this young man says, oh, a compound sentence, that's like a compound word. So I said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, well, a compound word is 2 words put together to make one big word. So a compound sentence is 2 sentences put together, make one big word. I said, you know what? You are brilliant. I've never had anyone make that connection before, and I'm going to use it from here on out. So I don't know, maybe you all thought of that, but I just thought that was an absolute brilliant connection for this young child in this class. Okay. So more on compound complex sentences. So I kind of already went through this, these images. What teachers need to know is that using these coordinating conjunctions can help to create a compound subject, a compound predicate, right, where we have 2 do's in the sentence or 2 verbs in the sentence. It can create commas in a list, and we can have those compound sentences where we have 2 independent sentences combined with the conjunction. And then when we think about, this formula, we have independent sentence or independent clause, and a fanboy, right? Now, one thing that is not in our standards in Maryland, I don't know if it's in yours in Ohio, we don't talk about the semicolon. So the semicolon can be used to pop out the conjunction. So you would have an independent sentence or an independent clause, and instead of having one of those conjunction words, you just use that semicolon. And again, that's something that a lot of us educators don't know. We may do it in our writing, but we rely on spell check and computers to correct it for us with the correct punctuation. So it is something that we need to be aware of. A lot of teachers will get confused between the independent clause and the independent clause, and then anytime they start seeing a conjunction, they think they need a comma. But here you could see the parents could sit and chat. Sit and chat is an example of a compound predicate within that second independent clause. So, I would just say, when you start doing any of this work, support work with educators, go slow and steady with them, and make sure they have resources to help support this kind of instruction in the classroom, because it's hard. All right. How do you guys feel FISTA 5 with, I don't know how much you want me to go into compound complex sentences, or do you want me to get to the an instructional approach? And I know we're a small group, so I don't want to make anybody feel like they're being called out like I was by William. Because he loved to get a rise out of people. Do you want me to talk about clauses and phrases or move on to the instructional approach? What do you guys think?
I'm good with instructional approach if everybody else is.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move past this. I want you to know in the slide deck, I just define these portions so you could use some of this information with teachers. And then I have some examples of phrases where you can, have them identify and find, the responses as to what these are. Teachers do struggle with this. I struggled with it for a long time. The one that I'll just mention before I get to the instructional approaches is this one. And this word since sometimes throws people off. So what William used to tell me, and I just want you guys to use this as well. If a word is throwing you off and you're not sure how it's functioning in the sentence, replace it with something that you know. So you could say when it fell, because it fell. And then you'll be able to identify that that is a subordinating conjunction. That's going to be part of a dependent clause. So Anytime a word like throws you off, replace it with another word that you're more comfortable with and see if it fits. And then you'll be able to determine, you know, how it's functioning in the sentence. And I thought that was a really, really good tip. Okay. So I just have some options here. Also, teachers, one more time, they'll need to know the formula of when to use a comma and when not to use a comma in complex sentences. So that will be on a slide here for you all to make sure that you could break that down for teachers. And then this slide, I think, is pretty helpful. When I was working with a group, they asked me to kind of label it out. So I tried to be really cognizant of using for the conjunction that red that we saw in the very beginning, and then underlining the doer and the do on both sides of the sentence to help teachers understand what types of sentences they are. So just know that will be in there as well. If I'm going too fast, anybody, you guys stop me. Okay. Okay. I got a thumbs up. That's good. So as we get into instructional approach, the goal is sentence generation, but the ultimate goal is to get kids to transfer the skill into their own writing, right? And this is the problem with many of us, myself included, who used to do daily oral language every day out of those DOL books and worksheets and dittos, right? So one way we can help kids do sentence generation work is to give them guided sentence generation work. And a lot of this comes from William's book, Writing Matters. You can still purchase that on his website. His brother and his sister-in-law are still running his website, so you can still find his materials. And so what that does is it helps kids, again, when you go back to that simple view of the not so simple view of writing, it helps with that executive functioning by you giving them some of those scaffolds. So I have a lot of examples here, which give some of those scaffolds to get kids started with this. And again, to get kids, teachers thinking, identification is going to be a small part of your instruction. We want to get kids to sentence generation. That's the piece we need to get to. And if kids can't do it outright, we need to provide a scaffold for them. So these are some examples of what that scaffold might look like. Does that make sense? All right, so let's get into the lesson format. Okay, so this is an approach that I personally developed with a ton of colleagues over 3 years in the school system that I left in 2020. So this is what we did. We would choose a standard, okay? We're gonna look to the language and writing standards from our state to pull these out. And we can do a map over that pattern sequence that you saw to see what's missing, what might be duplicated, that sort of thing. We're going to rethink how much time we dedicate to language instruction. And instead of doing a full 30, 40-minute lesson, we're going to only allow ourselves 5 to 10 minutes a day. We're going to work on one skill or one standard for 5 to 10 days, 1 to 2 weeks of instruction, moving from oral language into written language. All right. So this is what the sequence of instruction might look like. You're always going to start with your I do, and you'll briefly identify. Okay. So you're going to state what it is you're learning, like we do everything else, and you're going to identify, look at some sentences to identify that component. Then we're going to do a lot of we do activities, and the we do activities are really going to depend on the complexity of the skill, right? So if you're teaching kids how to generate a question and they're pretty familiar with it and they're good, it might take you a week. If you're starting to teach independent and dependent clauses, you may need to do that over 2 weeks. Does that make sense? So it would depend on the skill. And I'll have different activities. Oh, we lost somebody. Okay. Then we'll finally get into at the end, a you do. So this is going to be the generation or the sentence creation. And we always want to end with sharing and discussing, and finally making sure that kids understand, how does this help you as a reader or writer? Let's tie it back to what we want them to do. Okay, so this is what the instructional approach might look like. So 1 to 2 days of explicit I do instruction, right? So we're going to pull out maybe a mentor sentence from a text. We're going to model it. We're going to have some sort of an anchor chart to refer back to. Then we're going to move into a we do section with corrective feedback. This might be 2 to 5 days, and these are estimates, okay? So we might do a little bit more identification. We might do some noticing of things in sentences. We might do matching of sentence parts. We might do some sorting, some prompts, some sentence completion, some of the be the sentence that you saw where with the index cards. Then we'll move into a we do, you do. So gradual release. Maybe this is sentence unscrambling. Maybe this is writing it 2 different ways. Maybe this is revision work where we're doing expansion activities. Maybe it's about sentence combining. And then finally, 1 to 2 days where they're generating a sentence on their own. And then after that, we want to see this in practice. So let me give you an example of how we kind of set up this scope and sequence. We looked at our writing units and we said, okay, in 3rd grade, we're going to be teaching narrative beginning in November. Kids need to know how to punctuate dialogue in narrative writing. So we're going to start teaching narrative. We're going to start teaching dialogue in terms of grammar and punctuation starting in October, so that kids have a lot of time to practice it at the sentence level before they're asked to apply this within longer pieces of text. Does that make sense? So that's kind of how we mapped it out. We always make sure that we provide feedback with a partner that we share with the class, and that if we're going to be doing editing tasks, make sure that educators do not ask kids to rewrite incorrect sentences. I've seen this done. We only want kids to correct sentences, not write things incorrectly. And I only say that because I've seen it done in the past. And I'm going to pull up a sample scope and sequence so you can see what this looks like. So hang on. Whoop. I don't know what just happened there. Let me just pause share for a second and pull this up. Do you have questions on this approach so far?
So you
Nothing?
basically created a map for every grade level.
We
working
did.
Working kind of backwards.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did. Mhm.
And for every grade level, it was 5 to 10 minutes on
Yes.
that lesson.
Yes, the first day might have gone over to like 15, but we really did ask teachers to keep to that 5 to 10 minutes, knowing that they'd have 1 to 2 weeks. And the other thing we did within the context of, let me pull this up a little bit so you can see, every grade level, with the exception of 3rd grade, had time in 4th quarter to either review or slow something down prior to. 3rd grade, for our standards in Maryland, has the most amount of standards for everything. So if they didn't keep to a 2-week pacing for the language standards, they would not have been able to teach all the language standards. But every other grade level had an entire 4th quarter, or at least most of 4th quarter, to be able to slow down or review something that maybe they didn't spend enough time on. But we really did try to map out from simple to most complex in the grade level, and then really paying attention to, is something really going to be needed within the context of our writing unit? So if something was about punctuating direct quotes for an expository piece of writing, we would want to teach that a couple of weeks before we started teaching the writing unit, so that they were able to do it at the sentence level, and then weave it into the other piece, if that makes sense. But yes, we did this for every single grade level.
And then what did you, if a school district has a 30-minute writing block,
Yep.
what was your suggestions for what they do for the rest of that block?
So the other pieces in primary, I would spend time on handwriting and maybe picture story, word story, or response to text. In upper elementary, I would teach paragraph writing, narrative writing, so that they're spending a couple of weeks on a particular type of writing. and learning the structure of that with beginning, middle, end, and weaving all of that in. Yeah. What are your thoughts or questions? Oh, did you just see what I was sharing or nothing was showing? Nothing was showing. Of course not, because I'm dopey and I hit pause share and never showed it to you. Hold on. Here we go. This is what our scope and sequence look like. So I was pointing in the fourth quarter and you couldn't even see it. But this was 5th grade. So we had mapped this out for every single grade level. And then what we did is we had 2 resources. We used this resource and this resource to then put together lessons to give them ideas of what they could do to support students and some sample anchor charts. So it was a lot. And we pulled out mentor sentences from texts that we were reading within our scope and sequence for comprehension, so that we were trying to tie as much of this together as possible.
Are you able to share this so that we could put it in the Padlet as an example?
I will share the scope and sequence. Yes, absolutely.
And what was the second book? So I got Writing Matters and the other
Oh.
one was Patterns
of Power by Jeff Anderson.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So let me get the scope and sequence. Got it. And I'm not going to share all the lessons right now because I'm in the process of redoing all of them so that I'll be able to share that with school systems. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on them now, knowing what I know now than what I knew about, 8 years ago. So, okay, William, prior to him passing, had shared these in some of his online classes that he was doing during COVID. And this was his IECC approach to sentence generation and learning language. So he was working on, and I don't think he finished it, but just to give you an idea of what this might look like, this would be a better kind of worksheet than what I used to do in the classroom, which is all identifying. So he's got 3 sentences here where they identify the adjectives and he gives them the number of adjectives in the sentence. So there's no guessing. He gives them 2 expansion sentences, 2 combining activities, and then 2 write your own activities. So this is an example for adjectives. And then there is another one here for compound sentences, same kind of thing, identify, expand. And this is where the combining, he gives 2 parts of the sentences where they can combine it together, or then the option 2 is 2 sentences where they're combining it together. That makes sense. And then create at the bottom. So I think that sometimes is helpful for teachers to think that we're not talking about doing 10 sentences a day, like it's 1 or 2. So it's a lot more manageable in that 5 to 10 minute time frame than thinking about, so like day 1 could be this part, day 2 could be this part, day 3 could be this part, day 4, day 5, if that makes sense. What are you guys thinking about at this point? What are your thoughts?
I'm thinking it's a lot, but definitely organized in such a way that it's manageable. And I think, like, if I was going to say, take my lit leaders through this, I would try to find manageable pieces and take it down into component parts across time,
Yeah.
to show them this execution of how to do this.
Yeah.
To make it, I just think it's, to make it manageable, I think is the word I want to use.
Yeah, that's a good point.
because it's good and I think they would welcome this because it's the piece that, in my opinion, has been missing all year. I mean,
Yeah.
here we are at May.
Yes, I know, slow and steady.
I know, but I seriously, it's been reading, dyslexia law and this kind of
Yeah.
thing. What program are you using and what universal screener will you get? And it's the same song and dance, again and again. All important. I'm not taking anything away from it. It's
Oh,
important.
yeah, I get it.
But I do want to know about the writing too.
Yeah, it's a lot. And here's the thing, this is totally my opinion, but until school systems allow elementary school teachers to be area specialists, I don't really think we're going to see a change. Like, why do we wait until middle school and high school to be specialists of our content? And why are we generalists in elementary when we're trying to build a foundation for kids? I don't know. It's just my opinion. You may disagree if you like to teach everything, but it's a lot. It's a lot to learn. It's a lot to know. Yeah. Is that helpful?
I think these tools are going to be really helpful because districts are looking for good, solid writing curriculum, and it just doesn't seem to be out there.
Yep.
And so, what is best practices, how it is aligned to grade level and aligned developmentally and in a clear scope and sequence, I think this will be really, really helpful. Yes, it's going to be a lot of work, but I feel like they're hungry for this.
Yeah.
It'd be helpful.
I agree. So oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. The other thing that I think about when I'm looking at these examples is that this can really be kind of matched to whatever you're teaching, and you could pull things out to try to correlate it with that, maybe that knowledge piece that you're working on, or even something in science or social studies, so that it's so they're writing about what they're learning also and still having that same connection.
Yeah. Absolutely. I put together a slide with all of the practice activities, just to kind of, have a list of good activities that can really support this kind of work. So, if you have any questions on any of these things, I mean, I think most of it makes sense. A lot of it is from Writing Matters. Some of it is not. Some of it is just from things I've done. But, we really want to move from that oral language to print. But even for kids that can't write it right now because of spelling or handwriting issues, we can do all of these things through oral language. And that is a critical piece that we need to remember. I forgot that I left this in here. We also started to create, based on William's work, like using this identification, expansion, generation as assessment tools to see where kids were and what they could do. So this is just an example from 4th grade. And so, for kids that were just at the identification level, they would take an assessment just there. Kids that were ready to combine, we could give them an assessment there, or kids that were able to generate. And this was just a good formative tool that we would use to kind of have conversations with parents or kids about goal setting and how we could move them from point A to point B. So that's just another idea about how to use these things. And then there are many, many resources. This one I'll make sure I put into the chat box, this link. This is a really great article. It's all about sentence level instruction and the importance of sentence level instruction and how it makes a difference for extended writing pieces. Because sometimes people just believe, like, I just need to teach them writing. I'm just going to teach them how to write, narrative writing. Well, there's a progression of skill. So that's a really great example. And then the Writing Revolution, somebody mentioned that earlier. They have lots of free things on their site with free sentences for combining and expansion. Some of it's for older kids, but you could definitely take a look at that for resources that are free. And then, like I said, William's book, his website's right here. His brother and sister-in-law are still running that. So it's available on his site, wvce.com, ed.com.
Along with the recording, I'll put those resources in separate into the resource column so you can access them a little bit quicker as well. I've been
Awesome.
adding the things to the Padlet that Amy's been putting in the chat, so a couple of things are already there.
Yep. I think the only thing I have to get you is the video of picture story, word story. I think everything else I've given you. And I can do that before we get off today.
I have,
Christine, I think was gonna, or Christy was gonna copy the Bell's book page for
Yep.
you. I have to get you the video. I gave you the link to the scope and sequence.
yep, that's already in there.
I have
And
to
then
get
we're,
you the sentence scope and sequence. Right?
say it again.
The sentence scope and sequence?
Yes.
Yes.
And then we need to email Lucy about how we can get the Bell's
the
book.
The Bell's books, yes.
Yeah.
Forgot about that. Okay. Thought I wrote that down.
Now, I know that the strategy that you shared is in the early childhood letters.
Yes.
But your video will probably provide enough example that because I don't think we'll be able to link that,
The video?
right? Are we allowed to link that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
I'll take
it's
care of
on
that.
YouTube. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. I think. No, that's not what I want. I thought I just found.
Am I allowed to share with my lit leaders any of this information I learned today? I don't want to. I have a lit leader in every district in Allen County, which is Lima. And I just found this so informative, and it's the end of the year now, but it's probably not something we want to share out beyond us.
That's for Debbie to decide. I don't know how you guys want to handle that.
Okay.
This would be something that I would mail them. I mean, I think that I would pull out and do it with them or show
Okay.
it, with them. But in my mind anyway, I mean, let's share the wealth, but I don't think just sharing the resource is going to be maybe the best impact. But yes, please share with your people and get the word out on good writing instruction.
Okay.
This would be a great time for planning if they're having any planning meetings across the summer, to have these resources available.
Debbie, I just put in the chat box the scope and sequence for the language lessons.
Okay, I
And
see
then
it.
I'm gonna get you guys right now the video before you guys leave. And then I'll email and I'll copy you on the email for Lucy. If that's okay.
That sounds great.
Okay, other questions, comments?
I don't know. Thank you, Amy. I always learn so much from you. So
Um,
I think I told all of you that Amy was one of my letters instructors and I've just hung on to her. So.
Well, I'm grateful that you have.
So we're hoping that we can bring her next year is our hope to continue this. So if you have thoughts and ideas of things you'd like to learn about, if you could email those to me, you can talk with your colleagues at your districts and kind of let us know. We would be happy to, I mean, the whole point of this is tailor it to what you need, so that we're giving you information that's going to be helpful.
Generative AI product.
Sorry, I just found the video. Crazy here. Yeah. This is it. Okay, that's the video for picture story, word stories. You can pop that in the Padlet.
Okay,
And then, oh, we lost Christine. And then I'm gonna
this is
email.
me. Sorry.
No, no worries. All right, and then I'm gonna email you, Lucy, and copy you on that, Debbie, and to get the Bell's book.
That, and then as soon as I get that, I'll let you guys know. So, you know, I know Christy, you're thinking about ordering it for your kindergarten teachers. So if you want it for a resource for yourselves or, you know, whatever, I'll share that with all of you as soon as we get it, some information. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else anybody wants, ask Amy now, because this is our last one for the year. Okay, Amy's video is now linked there. And then, are you okay with sending the PowerPoint, Amy?
I will do that right after. I'll put it in a PDF and send that to you.
To
And I wanted to ask, what did I want to ask? Deborah, what's your